Yeah. Okay. Should we get started? I got the thumbs up from the back of the room. Okay. Hello and welcome to our 7th in our food safety culture webinar series. It's so great to see all of you online, and we've got about 400 participants right now and a full room here at the Food Safety Summit on the last day, which is just wonderful. So those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Vanessa Kaufman. I'm the director of the Alliance to Stop Foodborne Illness, a program which brings together industry, academics, and our favorite regulators to work collaboratively on advancing food safety culture throughout the food system. I, along with Chris Waldrop, who's here in the front from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, will serve as your moderators for today. In this session, we will hear not only from the FDA, but from the USDA. There we go. Regarding their take on measuring food safety culture from a regulatory standpoint, the science behind measurement, and from 2 panelists about how they've integrated measurement of food safety culture within their organizations. That's a lot of content. So to maximize our time, I won't be reading anybody's formal bio. You can find it online on the Zoom registration page where you've registered for this wonderful event. Before we dive in, I want to remind everybody of just a few housekeeping things. So first of all, this event is being recorded. Obviously, we're in a webinar, and it'll be posted to the STOP website and YouTube later, potentially later today, or if we're not that quick, by Monday. You can earn 1 continuing education credit for this webinar and 1 for each in the series. So if you haven't seen the other 6 in the series, please go and watch those and earn your continuing education credit. There's a form that will be attached in the follow-up email to this webinar, and it can also be found on our website. For those who are attending virtually, you will be muted, so please use the Q&A function to ask questions, not the chat function. And if you're in the room, please state your name and affiliation before asking a question so that those online can know who is here. And virtual attendees, please make sure to use the upvote function in the Q&A so that the most popular questions will rise to the top, and hopefully we can answer those first, although we may not be able to get to them all. Okay, so I will turn it over to Conrad Chouanier to introduce a little bit about himself and what's going on at the FDA in the world of food safety culture. Conrad?
Thanks, Vanessa. Hello, my name is Conrad Chouanier. I direct the Office of Analytics and Outreach at our Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. I have been helping co-lead this effort on food safety culture as part of the new era for smarter food safety. My partner in this is Don Prater, who you have probably heard this morning at the town hall. And so he and I have been working taking a 3-pronged approach toward food safety culture across the food supply. Our goal here is to promote food safety culture from farm to fork. So we have 3 prongs in this. One is to promote it throughout the food system, from growers to suppliers and everyone in between, to promote it throughout the agency. And this in a way has kind of expanded to throughout the agencies with FSIS and our international agency partners, as well as developing and promoting food safety in the home and seeing how we might be able to learn from what we are doing in food safety culture and what industry is doing in food safety culture and some of the concepts around that and translate that into effective consumer education. Now, within our food safety culture core element, we've had a number of activities. This webinar here is one of the key activities that we've had. It provides a forum for you all to share what you know, your experiences in your journey, to bring folks from different sectors of the industry to share what they've been doing on various topics related to food safety culture. It's been helpful for us at FDA to learn, to hear about food safety culture efforts across the food supply. We've also developed some internal training to raise some just knowledge and awareness of what food safety culture is an understanding that it's not a slogan, that there is some science behind it, so that folks can better understand what we're trying to do. And we've been doing some research along with other activities. And one key part of our research was this lit review that we did. We completed a systematic literature review on the scientific literature around food safety culture. We also looked at the gray literature, that literature that may not be in the published peer-reviewed journals. And we found a lot of, we were looking at 3 different areas primarily: how it's defined, how it's promoted, and how it's assessed. And we have a really strong interest in how it's assessed. In that literature review, we identified that there are a number of validated tools out there for assessing food safety culture, and that these are valuable tools for industry to assess their progress, and they can be used to identify areas for improvement. So our interest in assessment is growing, and many of you may be wondering if FDA is going to start assessing food safety culture. And I'm not going to say no, we aren't, but I'm also not going to definitively say yes. We still have more to learn in this space. It is an open question, but we are thinking about how food safety culture could be assessed, and how that could be useful for us. So in particular, we see if we are able to assess food safety culture, that we could use it as a tool to help us prioritize our efforts. It could be efforts around inspections, for instance, or it could be used for informing how we might respond in the midst of a foodborne incident within industry. Or as Don may have mentioned this morning, he didn't mention food safety culture specifically, but thinking about how we could use it in a broader surveillance effort to assess the overall state of the food supply system. However, if we are to use it in that way, then we need to be able to not just know it when we see it, right? We need to be able to actually measure it. And one of the areas that we found in our lit review, an area of opportunity here, is the need to validate these tools in a predictive way. There has not been much work done to assess how predictive food safety culture is in determining food safety outcomes. So there's been some research done, like case studies looking at firms that were involved in outbreaks and retrospectively looking back at their food safety culture and determining that a poor food safety culture may have been a determinant. But there's not been much work looking at, okay, well, does as a firm or a manufacturer with strong or mature food safety culture have better food safety outcomes? Not that I doubt that food safety culture will lead to better food safety outcomes, but I believe there are some doubters out there. I'm actually very confident that strong food safety culture will and does result in good performance. It just hasn't been demonstrated in the scientific literature yet. So one day, I'm hopeful we'll get there. Lone and I are on a mission. Predictive validity now.
T-shirts.
But until that day, we think it's important for us to continue to improve and strengthen food safety culture across the whole food supply chain. And I'm hopeful that we will, this discussion today will get many of you interested in how we can better assess and get to that point of being able to predict food safety outcomes. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Conrad, and thank you for having me to talk about USDA and FSIS take on this afternoon. So for FSIS, we've been really interested in the conversation with FDA when we heard about food safety culture. My name is Hani Sidrak. I'm the Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Field Operations in FSIS. It was supposed to be Dr. Bronstein here, but he had a change in careers and and just over a period of very couple of weeks. And so I'm here to respond on this initiative and on his behalf, and I guess on behalf of the agency. And I've been with the agency for some time, and when I hear the word food safety culture, I really think back and prior to HACCP and after HACCP, and there's really been a change in food safety culture within the agency and the industry that we regulate, meat, poultry, and egg products. I think in terms of the agencies look into what we assess is more of pathogen reduction. So it never been really that closer look into food safety culture. What does it mean? How we assess the outcome of an inspection? You could see in our strategic plan, as the slide shows, we're really capitalizing on preventing foodborne illness, transforming inspection strategies, policies, and scientific approaches to improve public health, and achieving operational excellence through maintaining a well-trained workforce. So that well-maintained workforce is where we're really capitalizing on making sure that our inspectors are looking at food safety aspects of the operations. Oftentimes, prior to HACCP, or even as recent as, and continue to be in traditional inspection, frankly, we do antemortem, postmortem inspection, of course, at slaughter establishments. And with that, there are a mix of food safety related issues and maybe other consumer protection. Some really hinges on quality issues. That is something that we're constantly trying to and get the data to inform the process of an inspection and the outcome. The purpose, obviously, of it ultimately is that I look at the establishment, and if everything is being controlled, process controlled, then the agency essentially sits back and, okay, well, no problem. So food safety culture, to me, with the industry that we regulate, it show in how much of a process control when nobody's looking, right? And whether or not the plan that's being filtering down or instructions from corporate is being followed. Those are, to me, really indicators of food safety culture within the establishment. However, as Conrad said, I don't know if that's really all the assessment. We definitely see a strong correlation between an establishment that's having a strong food safety culture and the results of the inspection that we are present there and every day in those establishments. That what's the outcome of these inspection activities? So I wanted to also touch a little bit on in terms of protecting public health on the issue of what we are doing in the Salmonella Initiative and other micro testing, whether it's establishment micro test results versus FSIS micro test results, and how we correlate those two. That also gives an indication of food safety culture and how strong it is in an establishment. So all those things are really, they come to play in presenting an opportunity for us to discuss with our FDA partners and really arrive to a better understanding of what we mean by food safety culture. That's pretty much what I wanted to just put forward as in for our discussion moving it on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haney. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's one of the last sessions of the summit, and I think the participation here, the full room speaks to how much you care for making a difference in the world of food safety. We have the topic, as Vanessa said, around measuring what you treasure. And I thought it would be very appropriate to start with just looking at that we're ultimately, when we're measuring, trying to go to the next slide.
Apologies.
We're trying to grow a mindset of food safety that is lasting. While I appreciate that regulators have their job to do, our job is to make sure that we are fostering these mindsets every day for every decision that happens, be that on the sanitation shift at midnight when nobody's watching, or when somebody's purchasing some new material for a company, or if you're acquiring a company, et cetera, et cetera. We need a mindset of food safety so that food safety is part of it. Measuring is part of making sure that there's feedback and we can drive that mindset to everybody. And it's about strengthening that mindset. And neurologically speaking, if we don't strengthen, we prune. And that means that food safety is out of sight. It's not a part of the mindset. And therefore, I'm really excited about the topic that we have at hand today, because by measuring, we can shed some light on how we're actually doing. If we then, just to go really down to the fundamentals of what we are measuring for, the key to measuring is obviously multiple. And I think do you want me to click?
You can click.
Yeah.
You cannot go backwards.
I will not go backwards.
Well, you cannot.
I will not, even if I could. I think it's so. Let's look at why we measure food safety culture or any kind of food safety in the first place. Well, we want to know to what extent food safety procedures are acted on as expected. So we have multiple measures to do that. And I think we're very good at that mindset as food safety professionals. We also measure to understand the strength of these food safety mindsets in individuals and groups. And that's where we get into combining different types of measures. I'm a firm believer at using what you already have when it comes to understanding your culture. And I think some of these system performance measures that you already have in place, many of you like EMP, environmental monitoring programs, customer complaints, audits, et cetera, they do tell you something. And I agree with Haney that some of our existing measures do tell us something about culture. We might just need to look at them a little different. Then we have some behavioral measures. We're starting to see more and more of that, and many of you probably apply those as well. Gemba walks, getting you cross-functional teams out there and actually looking at how is that mindset being put to work every day. Observations. It's remarkable what you can do when you stand in a corner and become part of the fabric and just look at people. And how you see that mindset being acted on, that's a form of measure as well. Big fan of focus groups, personally, having somebody sit down with a group of people that work in your plants, or your companies, your restaurants, your retail outlets, and just ask them simple questions and listen. It's remarkable how much we can tease out of that when it comes to culture as well. And then we have the assessments, engagement surveys, food safety culture measures. Many of you do engagement surveys already. I think we can repurpose some of that when we talk about measuring food safety culture as well. There's certainly doing an actual assessment where you go out, you do surveys, focus groups, interviews, you triangulate all of that, and then you get a result for food safety culture. So there's multiple different tools out there, and our conversation today is very agnostic to any of these commercial tools, because we want you just to think about what are some of those measures that you might actually already have that you can use to get an indication of those mindsets and cultures, but also you need to find the tools that are fit for your organizations. There's not one size that fits all here. And there's also, oh, I've got this one now. There's also not one measure for food safety that fits every stage of culture. And I think this is a little bit of a different way of thinking of food safety measures as well. You need to adapt your food safety performance measures to the stage of maturity. And you have to do that consciously to encourage the wanted behaviors. Because if you are in a stage 1, if you use a maturity model, and Brian is going to talk much more about how they do that at Treehouse, if you're stage 1 where you're very immature, you can actually use measures like audit findings. You can use compliance to communication and training schedules to drive improvements in your culture. But if you're in a stage 3, those types of measures will likely not drive any improved behaviors for you anymore. Doesn't mean that you stop measuring them, but don't expect necessarily to see improved behaviors through that kind of measures. Then in stage 3, you might want to actually get in and look at something like near misses, behavioral observations, like I mentioned before, Gemba walks, because now we need to mobilize all of these individuals that now have a budding food safety mindset. We have to put them to work out there and to start just growing some different behaviors. And when we get into those very mature organizations, now we can look at risk analysis, cost of poor quality or cost of quality, because now we're building these, or we're acting on these measures on the basis of a very mature mindset of food safety or culture. So I just wanted to leave you with that as well, because I think we can do more. We talked yesterday about reducing complexity in what we do with food safety and in organizations, and doing more with what we already have in the context of culture, I think is entirely reasonable. Then I'm going to make a shameless plug on behalf of Conrad and I for a project, Redico. And it's because we really want to get after this predictability now. And again, we will have t-shirts made up and for sale. We need more t-shirts for that, right? So what the idea here is that we want to establish an independent, protected, anonymous database. We would like to invite companies to share their data, food safety performance and culture data, and then use machine learning and AI tools to really mine and explore the data. The aims of this is to, 1, build a database for food safety measures. I get this question a lot. What should we be measuring? What's the connection to behaviors? And then it is, to Conrad's earlier point, really to explore the correlation between food safety performance and culture. I am scared out of my wits at the moment that we are getting into a space where food safety culture becomes what unfortunately sometimes HACCP is, which is a compliance measure, or it's a compliance issue. We put a check in the box and we've got it covered, and we don't actually get the behavior changes that we need to start making a dent in the illness numbers or the impact on public health. So why should you join? We actually think that you can strengthen rather than prune food safety in your organization if you share. You can get insights into what is developing in general on this topic through the summaries of measures. And then we can get also just, again, this insight into what drives food safety and culture performance. Contact Conrad, contact myself, let us know if you want to know more, but we really like to get this up and running. Conrad, is that good? Okay. And of course, we'd like to invite USDA to participate in that as well if they like. So
we'll be there.
And with that, I am going to pass it over to Brian.
Thank you, Long, and thank you to the presenters here in STOP. And I'm really pleased to be honored to sit up here with the panelists and tell you a little bit about our journey, right, of food safety and quality. And it is a journey. My name is Brian Perry. I am Chief Safety Officer at Treehouse Foods. I help to support our food safety, quality, and regulatory teams, as well as our EH&S teams, our environmental health and safety teams at Treehouse. So you probably all know McDonald's, you probably all know USDA and FDA, and everybody knows Long. You might not be that familiar with Treehouse. Treehouse, we have the privilege and responsibility of protecting 2 brands in the marketplace. First and foremost is our customers' brands. So we're primarily a private label and contract manufacturer, and we are essentially the supply chain for those customers. So think about that privilege and responsibility that comes with that. and how you're known by your reputation, and how you are able to execute and protect public health and protect the brand and make sure that you're, to our treehouse purpose, engaging and delighting one customer at a time. So go on the adventure with me, will you? If you would. We're talking about a journey, and it is a journey. And if you can kind of see our Hobbit friend here, he has a map and he's very excited. He's jazzed. He's ready to go on his adventure. And I would argue that, to build on Lone's comments about how you begin this journey, one of the great measures you can do is to take a maturity assessment. That then becomes your map, right? We saw the Hobbit, he had his map. This will help you to understand what are the levers that you need to pull at each one of those stages. Now, we began this journey a long time ago, and we used a model that has actually been published that was really more of a culture of quality model, but we were able to repurpose that because there weren't a lot of these models built at that time. So we wanted to have something that wasn't just home cooking. So we found something that was published and peer reviewed, and decided this was going to be how we addressed both our culture of quality and ultimately our culture of food safety. And as you can think about that, whether you go from, an absence of a food safety quality culture to getting to the creative food safety quality culture, the creative quality culture, think about what are those measures that you would have at each one of those. And what are the tools in your toolbox that would look different as you do this? And we have 26, now 27 manufacturing plants in Treehouse. Last year, about this time, we had 40. And as you can imagine, each one of those facilities, as you have new people come in and out of that, may be in different stages of that maturity journey. And you need to go and evaluate that. So one of the things that we've repurposed from our EH&S partners, we've included into our food safety and quality, is this idea that's built into our overall Treehouse management operating structure, what we call TMOS, of a maturity assessment. So you're able to measure, are these things in place? Are these elements in place? And that really helps you to understand what are the activities you're going to look at to build that forward. And how do you build that as part of your strategy? Everybody loves this quote. I love it. And I probably am dating myself by putting a Pac-Man reference on here. But, I think food safety and cultures, you define it for your organization. And what does that mean? And the beautiful thing about culture is that you don't have to do anything. And you have a culture, right? Each one of your organizations have a culture today. What you have to go back and take a look at is, how do I want to shape that culture? How do I make those food safety outcomes, those food safety behaviors inherent into that culture? And I would argue that you can't do it alone with just food safety culture. You need to make sure that it fits with your company's purpose, with your company's values, that it becomes a value. We talk about strategy, and I would say for food safety and quality employees, that's tough, right? The hardest thing for us to do is we see the ocean of opportunity is choosing what not to work on. And that builds a great strategy. But culture eats that strategy for breakfast, right? So how do we build those mindsets? How do we win hearts and minds? And I would say include your entire organization, right, as you go down this journey, because if you get everybody, we have 7,000 tree housers across North America. Roughly 5,000 of those are in our plants every day, producing great snacking and beverage products for our customers and our consumers. We've got to win the hearts and minds of those individuals every day and understand how their behaviors affect our food safety outcomes. And how do we get to that behavior observation system where we can build that peer-to-peer assessment and have it comfortable enough where people can look out for one another, right? But you also need to do the same thing for your accounting folks, people who okay your capital. How do their activities build into what your food safety culture is? And then look at those signals that you see, that peer buy-in, that leadership buy-in. As I mentioned, you've got to touch all levels of the organization. And it really becomes kind of the smell of the place, right? When you go into an organization, you can tell if they get it or not, right? From a food safety quality culture. So all of these things around motivation and the tools that you can use and the framework. The framework is really where I want to look at here, and how do you measure that? And how do you drive those metrics? How do you drive those accountability? So if you're going on a journey in your car, you want to know where you're going, right? The first thing you look at is the map and the maturity assessment. The second thing you want to look at is your dashboard, right? How well am I keeping it within the speed limit? How well is my engine performing? So how do we actually measure if we're going to be successful in driving the culture of food safety and quality that we want at Treehouse? You know, we do that a lot through our operational continuous improvement activities. I talked about TMOS and our Treehouse management operating structure. Having that feedback that we can give to employees in small group settings, immediately using those metrics, helps out a lot. It really drives that peer-to-peer behavioral observation system. You make sure that you're looking at outreach, your continuous learning and skills development. So as we think about metrics, we always are thinking about what are the leading metrics, what are the lagging metrics, what are the direct kind of measurements that we can make. One of the leading metrics we use at Treehouse to understand how well our food safety culture is at one of our manufacturing facilities is what is their percentage of our curriculum that we decide that we're going to deliver as part of training every month, and then ultimately at the end of the quarter. And we have a direct correlation in the performance of both productivity, our safety performance, and ultimately our food safety and quality performance on those plants that are always in the high 90s of their training and being able to develop that. It's a really good leading indicator. And as you think about the direct observations that you can do, engagement surveys, Lone mentioned, those are a great tool to get the direct feedback from your employees. We just completed one at the end of last year, and we had really good participation across the 7,000. And if you've done a survey, we had about 80%, which is really good to get that survey results back. And our highest index on the positive coming back was around, is safety and food safety a priority at Treehouse, which made me feel really good, but it also made me feel like there's a lot of work to do, because 74% said that, right? So that's pretty good. 10% said no, but it's that middle part. That's the opportunity, right? How do I win the hearts and minds of those in the middle between there? And those are the ones that are going to really make the food safety quality culture at Treehouse. You know, quality metrics that we look at, quality incidents. I know many of your organizations have that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Through this food safety and quality journey that we've been on and driving this culture of food safety, since 2019, this being a direct measurement, we've been able to reduce our quality incidents by 57% on the business we have now. And those can be the big oopses, from all the way to a recall or a shift's worth of product on hold, right? So it makes a difference, and that's a direct measurement of that. You know, we want to make sure that we are looking at other elements, and we're actually bringing in some additional resources to do a third-party assessment in our plants now of what our food safety culture looks like. And inevitably, given that it's human nature and we all as food safety quality professionals wake up each day and battle against entropy, there's going to be a time when it doesn't go right. And that is a time, I would say, as a metric and a measure, you should treat those like diamonds and really look at, how do you look at the root cause of why was that message of food safety culture not received? Was it in the delivery? Was it in how we did the nonverbal actions? Is it the leadership not underestimating the importance of that culture? And take a look at that. And we've had some really great presentations here about what root cause looks like. Take those opportunities to address that. And then again, here's another great example of GFSI audits. We all, if we're making food, probably have some GFSI audit. We have really seen this food safety culture work improve our overall quality system. So as you think about how you measure it, those leading indicators, those lagging indicators, and ultimately, what are the food safety outcomes that come from that food safety culture work? So now I'll turn it over to my colleague from McDonald's.
Thank you, Brian. You hear me okay? That's good. Okay, great. Here we go. So my name's Carly Bacon. I'm with McDonald's. I'm the director of our U.S. Supply Chain Food Safety Regulatory and Science. I would like to talk to you today about measuring food safety culture and what I feel like is a bit of a unique setup, and we call it the three-legged stool, or this is a three-legged system. And I know, and I listened to CDC yesterday talk about their investigation approach. They also used the three-legged stool. So I'll introduce a whole new idea here for three-legged stool with the McDonald's approach, and that's talking about the corporate, the owner operator, and the supplier perspectives on food safety culture. So just a quick introduction when we talk about McDonald's and what our footprint is around the world. I just wanted to let everyone kind of know size and scale. When you think about food safety culture, it certainly is something to wrap your head around. We have over 36,000 restaurants across the globe in over 115 countries. And of that, over 90% of those are franchise owned. So those are owner operators, small businesses running those operations. So regardless of the size and scale, the thing about McDonald's is we've been around for over 65 years, and we really have built our brand based on trust. And food safety culture is a perfect thing to talk about when we talk about trust. And you enter a McDonald's restaurant, you understand the quality, the food safety, and the consistency that you get with the food that you're purchasing. You are trusting McDonald's with all of that. And food safety culture is a big piece of the trust that we have with our customers. So what is food safety culture at McDonald's? Well, the goal is to have food safety culture that is strong across all three legs of the system. And we know that this means that every employee knows what to do, what's the right thing, regardless of who's watching and who's paying attention, right? So a little bit about how we have the program set up. It's really meant to elevate food safety culture through 4 different approaches. Does it fall into the talk about food safety culture, measure food safety culture, model food safety culture, talk about best practices and what's right, and also recognizing when we see food safety culture executed well, that's something that gets acknowledged. So just a little bit about how we do food safety culture. And then specifically on how we are measuring food safety culture across the 3 legs of the stool, we have established some specific measures or KPIs around food safety culture that we execute through a food safety culture assessment. And the assessment is done with McDonald's across the 3 legs of the stool, which again is the corporate entity, the suppliers, and our owner operators. And this is completed every 3 years. So we get that data, we can take a look at it, and then we can start setting our strategy for how we will continue to elevate and improve food safety culture as we move forward. On top of that, we also have other measures of food safety culture, right? It's not just a one assessment type of situation. And it depends on kind of which piece of the supply chain we're looking at, but it includes our supplier base with a system that we call our supplier quality management system, or SQMS. We have a specific food safety culture questions within our SQMS audit that takes place. We also measure food safety culture through our distribution centers and the compliance program that we have there, our restaurants, and through a number of other tools like training and making sure that we've got the adequate resources in place to continue to be innovative and push food safety culture forward. I'll also mention that kind of outside of that as well, we've collected plenty of data to understand and kind of verify how that's going, whether that be through social media or through customer contacts, et cetera. There are ways that we're also collecting and looking at food safety culture and how it's executed across the board. And through this slide, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about and kind of drive home that food safety culture across the three-legged stool means that myself as a U.S. market employee am pulling food safety culture and the program that we have from a global food safety culture strategy, right? So we've got the U.S. market. Again, we work very closely with our suppliers and our supply base to help elevate and share best practices and really understand food safety culture within the suppliers and also through the restaurant via our owner operators as well. So just a visual slide on kind of what that looks like and the timeline to date of what our food safety culture journey has looked like really formally kicked off back in 2017, where we pulled together, we recognized food safety culture was a piece that we needed to really deeply understand and assess. And so we pulled together stakeholders, including suppliers, and understand and align what a food safety culture program might look like and what more information we would need in order to move forward. So in 2018 and 2019, that's where we really developed the strategy itself and pulled together the assessment that we were wanting to do and deployed that. So that's our first set of food safety culture assessment data that we have on hand. And then 2019, we get that back, we take a look at it, and now we've got some information that we can do some hard data to help drive where the strategy should go. Where are we strong? Where do we have challenges? And where should we focus moving forward? In 2021, I'll talk about this in just a second, but in 2021, we also decided to incorporate the questions that we have in our quality management system, the SQMS audit that our suppliers go through each year, so that they have questions related to food safety culture that they are working through, and we incorporated that into 2021. And then just last year at the end of the year in Q4, we did our food safety culture assessment number 2. So this was 3 years after the first one. And now we have a whole new set of data that we can take a look at and see where have we made our improvements? Where do we still have challenges? And again, build the strategy moving forward for the next few years, so that we can continue to improve. And what I'm going to share in the next couple of slides are some outcomes from the 2022 data. And just to let you know that it was a real success when it comes to the number of participants that we've had and the reach that we had across the globe. So we had between 11 and 12,000 participants within the food safety culture assessment this year. And that again touched all 3 legs of the stool, from corporate to supplier to owner operator, across a number of markets or different countries that were taking the assessment. And we found that to be a very good indicator of interest in food safety culture in the first place. But then we were able to get the results and take a look at those. And I've got what hopefully you can see up there, a Venn diagram where we've laid out pretty simply for this presentation, but we do have dashboards that we can go in and look up very specifically for which market, for which leg of the stool, et cetera, kind of which section of the food safety culture assessment. We can see the results here, but as you can see, we can go in and we can say, these are our strengths in green, here are our challenges in red, and this is where we can continue to build out the strategy moving forward. So it's a very useful tool in helping us pull together our food safety culture strategy moving forward. And the other piece that I wanted to talk on just very quickly was our supplier questionnaire that we have within our SQMS audit. And our suppliers are a very important piece of the 3-legged stool, obviously. And we really see ourselves as McDonald's as a vehicle to bring those suppliers together and to discuss what's happening, where they're feeling challenged, where they've got areas that are working well. And so we talk about food safety culture quite a bit, and we ask them to share their best practices with each other, and so that we can borrow and steal from each other and continue to learn what's working best for others. And then with the food safety culture assessment piece within our SQMS audit, instead of just dropping that into the audit and letting it run, we actually let our suppliers know that we were going to be doing this in advance. And then they essentially had 1 year where they went through their audit and they got the questions. They went through the questions within the audit, but the results of those particular questions weren't scored against their final score. So it was kind of a run through for them, so that they knew exactly where they would be measured should the audit go live. So that was in 2021 or 2022. And then now in 2023, those food safety culture assessment pieces are actually within the audit, and that's being scored this year. So we're tracking those, we're trending those, and we can take that information back to our suppliers and share with them where they're doing strong and where there may be room for improvement. And so just to give you a flavor for, this is not everything that's within the audit that the suppliers go through, but the main highlights are that they must have a written food safety culture plan. So they've got to have it written down and outlined. And on top of that, they do have to have an assessment conducted so that they've got a measure that they can work with moving forward, where they can have an idea of where they're strong or where they have challenges. And, they first time around, they have a baseline, and then they can start moving forward from there. And that assessment has to be not just completed, but also analyzed, and that they pull together a continuous improvement plan. And I think that really pulls into, what Lone was saying with, as you have an assessment and you get your measures, those need to adapt with your maturity. So the improvement plan allows for the suppliers to really update the way that their food safety culture it is progressing based on their audits that they're doing and their assessments that they're doing as well. We also have that there needs to be a senior manager or somebody more senior within the company that actually has food safety culture responsibilities clearly outlined, and often that can sit within their job description. And again, kind of as a desire to get to a mature food safety model, we also have a requirement for near miss monitoring. So just to kind of wrap up some final thoughts on measuring food safety culture, I think that a lot of the feedback I get when we talk about food safety culture is, well, how can you measure it? It's culture. And obviously we've got some ideas up here that we think are helpful to continue to elevate and propel that forward. We really think about food safety culture as a whole. You have to look at the people, the processes, the purpose, why we're doing it. And we have to be proactive, right? So because food safety culture assessment is fairly new, we do think that there's a real benefit to talking about it, sharing best practices, understanding what kind of training or standardization might be helpful, and also looking at it from a continuous improvement point of view, where an assessment of food safety culture on one day should change as you move forward, because you should be looking at it and trying to improve. And, we know that everyone wants to know who's doing things well. And we encourage the sharing of best practices, any guidance that anyone has that they found has worked well. We all get better together. So just wanted to say thank you, and especially to a couple of my colleagues, Cindy Zhang and Gary Van Breda, who helped me pull together some of these slides, but it's been a real pleasure speaking to everyone today. So I'm going to pass it back to Vanessa.
Thank you. I have the power back. It feels so good. And thank you to our panel for sharing all of their insights. We have a lot of questions coming in online, and I'm going to ask Conrad the first one. It, as written, is a little bit maybe perhaps out of scope of the webinar topic, but I'm confident you can bring it back around. So here we go. The most upvoted question is, there have been appeals recently for the food aspect of the FDA to have its own division, separate from the medical device drug side. This is largely in response to the recent infant formula crisis, the rise in number of recalls, and the fact that foodborne illness incidents are not decreasing. What are your thoughts on this in the context of this webinar?
So I think I hope some of you were able to hear Don Prater's comments this morning about the redesign of the foods program. And we in the agency who have been working on this feel very confident that this will bring us to a more effective and efficient food safety agency. I'm not a fan of reorganizations for the sake of reorganization. And when thinking about it in the context of today's webinar, it's important not just to move boxes around, create new agencies. It's important to think about what the culture is in those agencies. Think about how the agency operates, how an organization operates. And that is what we are doing. We are taking a very thoughtful approach, taking a step back, thinking about how we have been operating and thinking about how we can improve, and thinking about some of the key aspects of culture that we discuss here in the context of our food safety culture webinars, whether it's about our processes, whether it's about how we incentivize and reward and recognize people, and thinking about our mission, and thinking about how we can organize our functions within the agency to best meet that mission. So as far as the separate agency, I won't comment on that. But I am very confident that what we are trying to do will result in a much stronger food safety agency.
Thanks, Conrad. Anybody else on the panel have anything, or should we turn it over to our in-room audience? Is there a question? Just raise your hand. Chris Waldrop will run you a microphone and you can ask. Okay, we've got a couple of hands up. And please remember to state your name and affiliation.
Hi, thank you. I'm Victoria Sluice, Director of Quality Assurance for JR Short Snack Products. Firstly, thank you very much to the panel for providing all the information today. I was wondering a question just on employee engagement surveys, if there were any resources you could provide or specific questions that you have found to be really helpful in getting meaningful food safety culture data. And also if you have any strategies on how to get employees to participate in those surveys and questionnaires so that we are able to get that data from our employees.
Well, I can tell you maybe some of the challenges, and you can learn from our challenges. To get more people engaged in taking surveys, one of the things that you need to make sure that you do is to ensure that that information is going to be wholly anonymous. So we've used a lot of different tools in taking surveys, and many of those have been electronic, in order to get 3 shifts of people and be able to interact with a tool. Typically, you have to have a login, you have to have a phone, you have to have, and many of our employees don't have access to computers, don't have an email address with Treehouse. So how do you make time for them to actually go and do the survey? But how do they know that you're not taking their employee ID number, right? And the messaging around that and working with your HR partners to make sure that the anonymity is sacred in those surveys, because you want the real, right? As the feedback comes in. And if there's fear of retaliation or anything like that with the survey, you need to make sure that's addressed. And I think the other thing I would add just quickly on surveys is, make sure that you're asking the questions multiple times in multiple different ways. And that also helps a lot. But there's a lot of tools out there that you can use, but definitely the anonymity helps make sure that you get the right answers you want.
I'd like to add just a couple of perspective for you on perspective. Let me try that again. Perspectives on that. I think Brian's point around anonymity is critical. Absolutely. I also think it's absolutely critical that you tie it back to making change. I mean, none of us likes to be asked and probed and then hear nothing. Why do you keep asking me if I don't actually even hear the results back through my supervisor, my manager, if we don't have an influence on what we do with those results? I think it goes back to just motivation, general motivation. Well, we should be excited. We're being asked, right? And we're excited because we know that when we get the results, we get to do something with that. So I think, and that takes an effort. And I unfortunately see a lot of companies that don't go to that extent of effort. So I would caution you against that.
And that's a great survey question, by the way. And one that we struggled with to start with over time is one of our questions was, do you think any action will be taken on the survey? And the first time we did that wasn't great. But that's how you earn the trust and build the credibility over time. And as we've seen in previous and later engagement surveys, that number's gotten a lot better.
One of the tools that you might want to look at, and I don't have any interest in any of these engagement surveys, is so the Glint survey is used by many companies. We just did a review of the Glint survey questions. There's 27 of them, and did an analysis on, so what are the risk mindsets that you can actually, with some reasonable accuracy, assume that people have if they answer these questions, favorable versus unfavorable. And I think that's the kind of analysis you want to go through to say, so what can we derive from this around food safety? I will caution anybody in just using a survey to think that you're getting a measure of your culture. Engagement surveys are not culture surveys. Doesn't mean you can't get information out of them to help you drive your culture, but they're not culture assessments.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that I think that it's important when the survey goes out that the message related to it is simple, and that it drives home that it is important that we get this information because we want to make positive change.
Did that help?
We have a question in the back.
Hi, Tim Jackson, FDA. A question, I really appreciate the focus on culture because it recognizes that food safety is a shared responsibility in the organization, and the examples from Treehouse and McDonald's are really useful to understand how that can be built and assessed within an organization. And I think on the regulatory side, and also for trade associations and extension groups, we often target our messaging to food safety managers, to the people who on the technical side who absolutely need that information and need to translate it. But I wonder what your thoughts are on how and when we can target messaging to senior leaders or to production or to some of the other functions to really help food safety managers get their message across and maybe have others pull for information.
Well, I'll start, at least. So FSIS operates under different acts from FDA. I recognize that we have presence every day in the establishments that we regulate. My overall experience has been actually that at the corporate level, there is typically a good understanding in food safety culture and expectations of our regulations and what the product and what does it represent and all of that to the company. And the question becomes is how much does it really filter down from a corporate office to establishments when a corporation owns several establishments throughout the United States? And that's what we really see because we're there every day. I can tell you that, to me, the most effective tool is that we talk to our employees, whether government or private sector, regulated industry, about the mission and how are they contributing to that. So everybody has a role in that process to actually ultimately, come. We're talking about culture here, so you could see it clearly. If it is a culture, everybody understands really why am I doing this? We're obviously intelligent people. I see that people have a lot more enthusiasm to do the right thing when they have a good understanding of how am I making a difference and how is my contribution and how my just little slice of that pie adds up at the end of the day. Having that understanding really is, in my mind, it's worth investing, whether you're government investing into your employees to see how do they fit in this big picture. And same thing for the regulated industry again. But whether we're talking to different levels of management, I think the same concepts here apply. And we do have regular weekly meetings with plant management where we operate, and we do have engagements throughout, the industry, whether it's individual corporates or associations. So these are my thoughts around the issue. Thank you.
I would encourage everyone to make sure that you're talking to senior leaders as soon as possible when you are talking about food safety culture, because you need their buy-in as you move forward to continue with the programs that you want to implement, to get the resources that you need, to get the time dedicated that it takes to, pull together the surveys or do the trainings or share the best practices, right? It's extremely important, especially, when we're getting the messaging out, hey, for this survey, it's very important. If they're not also hearing that from senior leadership, that food safety culture is important, then, they might question how important it really is. So start that conversation as soon as possible.
Tim, I think I would add the reason why we're here is stop foodborne illness. It's all about making food safety personal. So I think we just have to get back to that message across the organization as well, so that everybody in a food company always connects what they do every day to that we're feeding the world or we're providing great drinks or whatever it might be. So I think that's one thing that we as food safety professionals can get much better in tune with. We're very head focused. We're very intellectual, scientific. We're not necessarily always great heart people. And that's not, sorry, that was very offensive. We just don't gravitate to talking about that this is emotional, this is personal, this is tear jerking when it goes wrong. And I'm not necessarily a big advocate of sort of crying wolf, but we have to make it personal. And then we follow that up closely right after that with making sure that leaders, supervisors understands the risks that they impact directly in their job. So don't leave these personal stories by themselves, capitalize on them immediately to say, so what are the risks that you influence in your job in supply chain, when you're driving a forklift, if you're in the field picking berries? I think those two things would be the ones I think we need to just continuously push at.
And Lone, if I can jump in and make a shameless plug for the toolkit that we have available, which is free, and you can access online if you go to stopfoodborneillness.org. It's got some great resources, and we have videos of constituents who have dealt with a foodborne illness, and you can watch some of their stories. They're very powerful. I have a question from online, which I think is great because we have people in the room. So I definitely want to ask it. How many people here, and we won't be able to capture you online because we have a stationary camera in the back. So I'll just throw out my best guess, but how many people here are measuring food safety culture within their company currently? Okay, maybe half, maybe a little bit more. Interesting. Chris, did you have another question in the room?
Any other questions in the room? Raise your hand high.
May we go back to the online?
Okay, yeah, I'll editorialize this one again a little bit. But so we've been talking a lot at the conference about AI and the movement towards, advancing technologies, and the FDA has their new ERA blueprint published. How do we continue to evolve and advance food safety culture measurement in the face of rapidly advancing technology?
That's a good one.
Maybe I'll take a stab at it and then turn it over to my colleagues who are probably much more versed in this than I am. But two of our strategies that we've looked at is building a predictive quality system at Treehouse and error-proof food safety. We've used technology to do that. And, it is now the Internet of Things, right? And how do you take all of this data that you're getting in, whether it be direct line observations, whether it be analysis from equipment, and how do you make sense of that, right? How do you keep it simple for an operator? How do you engage an operator? Part of our purpose is to engage our customers one at a time, and our employees are our customers. So how do you make AI give you red screens, green screens? How do you make that predict then based on that data? How to do that. And we're very early on in that journey of how you do that with AI to do that, other than just statistical process control tools that we already had in place. But I think it's very, very interesting because we're all good data collectors, but how do you make that into making really good, insightful decisions? And I think AI is going to be a really good tool to do that.
I think this gets back at what one of the themes that Lone and I have been talking about too, is thinking about this and as some of these assessment tools in a more predictive way. In order for us to get to that place, we need a lot of data. And we know that there is a huge amount of data out there. And we know that data is in different formats and in different structures. And in the only way, I think not the only way, but we can use AI and machine learning and some of these new techniques to try, if we can get that data, we can get all that data together in one place, and then we can apply some of these new techniques to glean new information that we might not be able to see, particularly information that, everyone's got their own set of data. It's a perspective, but what if we got all that data together so we could have a broader perspective? Maybe, some of these assessment tools are measuring quite a number of different facets of culture. And maybe in reality, there's only 5 real key measures. But before we can get there, we need to bring that data together to understand. So, and I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Lone, in terms of how you see machine learning or AI fitting in there.
I think it's going to be transformational for us, because we can use unstructured data to drive conclusions from that if we use something like AI or machine learning. So we're no longer tied to the very structured databases to be able to do something with multiple data sources. I think that's absolutely key. Another thing that I think is key around data and technology is that we can get feedback to individuals faster. You can get more feedback on your behaviors or your mindset faster. We have a machine learning engine that we're using today, then it really serves just the purpose of making sure that supervisors and middle managers get feedback faster. So once a week, they get feedback on their culture. And I think that is critical also, to nudge your culture to just gradually every day nudge it forward. So I think, yeah, critical.
Chris, do we have a brave audience member who would like to ask a question? We've got a few minutes left.
They're courageous.
I know they're courageous. They also might be tired from a long week here at the summit. Oh, great. Got one down here.
Excellent.
Hi, everybody, and thank you to the panel. My name is Evan Johnson. I'm an FSQA manager for sheets distribution and manufacturing. as we've been rolling out our our culture program, we've been getting pretty good buy-in from production. We struggle with distribution and other facets of the facility that does not directly handle food. I would love to hear any recommendations to help increase food safety awareness, importance, and culture amongst the entire organization.
Yeah, I think it's about tailoring the message to your audience, right? Because your culture is about the behaviors, right? So the behaviors that you want to get to shape your food safety culture in your production environment are going to be very different, perhaps, than if you're driving a forklift, right? So I think keying in and what are those food safety behaviors that you want to portray, and how do you reinforce those when it comes to, am I picking the right product? Am I looking at stored product pests? Those are the type of things that, how do you engage people where they are, right? And one message in this does not fit all. And I think it's, how do you tailor it to the messages? Like if I'm talking to my CFO, my message on food safety quality culture is very different than if I'm talking to somebody who's on a forklift, right? Because the behaviors that give me the food safety quality outcomes that I want are different. So I think tailoring the message to your audience is the biggest thing.
I would go after risk as well. So look through with them. What are the hazards in that you influence or could introduce, and then have them part of the risk assessment. Get them actually to help assess the risks so that they have a little skin in the game. And I find it remarkable once you start to open up that Pandora's box, what you get out of that, because so many aspects of that you wouldn't have thought about, right? Because you're not in that field every day as well. So think about risks.
So I just want to add one more piece that I think it was resonated with me earlier today in the keynote speakers session, that the industry now has an opportunity to actually set the standard. We are really trying in FSIS to do that, reaching out. And I really think that you have a unique opportunity to help set the standard. So the data that you will be collecting and that type of information, I would talk about AI, is really going to be a key to help the regulators set a standard that is doable, that is achieving the foodborne illness prevention that we're all interested in and really thriving for. So I just wanted to put in that plug as well. Thanks. Okay,
and we have 1 minute left. So I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for participating today. I think this was a really enlightening conversation, but if you just have like one sentence, we'll go down the line of a final thought. Conrad?
Predictive validity now.
I do agree that food safety culture should not be measured by compliance. That really should be driven by food safety, period.
I would say sign up for a project Predico, so that we can get predictive validity now. And then I would also just encourage you to just keep pushing, keep raising the bar, just keep raising the bar. Don't settle. That's the one of us.
Yeah, I think it's about driving engagement and making food safety culture not just a priority, but a value, right? So our priorities change over time. Our values don't. So engaging your team members, making sure it's part of your values.
And I would say, look for opportunities to share your best practices. Let's learn from each other because we are better together in food safety.
Wonderful. Let's give them a round of applause. And if you enjoyed this session and you'd like to join us for the next in the Food Safety Culture webinar series, please sign up and log in on September 13th. We'll have Carrie Bridges from Chipotle Mexican Grill and Al Almanza talking about facing food safety challenges through culture and adaptability. So see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Time for a picture.